Hello, everybody. I'm so pleased to have you with us. I'd like to introduce, I have with me my colleague, Jason Abbott, and he is giving up an hour of his birthday to spend time answering your questions. So please make sure to ask plenty of questions, and I'm happy to answer those as we go, because I want to make sure that you have a full understanding of the program and get all your questions answered as much as possible. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And I wanted to explain first that the goal of today's webinar is to explain how to implement a partnership that should save you time, should save you effort, money, and it's really a win-win for the university and the community. So if you stick around until the end, I'm going to give you a chance to win one of 3 $25 gift cards for Amazon, because I really would like your feedback in terms of what your needs are and how I can support you if you should decide to implement this kind of partnership. So again, I really want to encourage you. We really invite your questions, and that's what Jason's here for. So please make sure that you ask your questions. The first thing I want to do is introduce the Campus Mentors model. What is the Campus Mentors model? And as you can see, there's 4 primary, elements that really make up the model. The best way to explain this is it's like you took a pre-existing classroom in a high school and you lifted it up and you just did everything the same. The funding is all the same. Everything's the same, except you lifted it up and you put it on a college campus. So it's kind of like the old laboratory school model, except it still uses the same teacher. So a regular high school teacher, and it is on campus. So it's on the college campus. It does have a youth population that is at risk, and that is something that can be defined jointly with your partners. And it offers 2 structures. There's daily tutoring and there's one-on-one mentoring. And both of those are really done by the college students. So at this point, please ask your questions about the model so I'm sure that you understand what it is. It's pretty simple, but it can be challenging to understand because it is different. It's not early college. It's not really the same as the laboratory school model, but again, it's just like you picked up a classroom and you just put it on campus instead of being at the local high school. So if you think of any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Again, I want to make sure you understand the model. I'm going to go on and talk about why this program is advantageous to you. So I don't have to tell any of you the issues that we have with candidate transportation and trying to get our teacher candidates out to multiple schools. It just seems to get harder and harder. So with Campus Mentors, we actually have up to 150 students in just this one classroom placement, and we'll go into that more later. As you know, one of the big pushes with CAEP is to link what teacher candidates do to K-12 student performance. And there are very few models that allow us to do that because of all the interventions and great things that are happening in schools. It's really hard to say, our teacher candidates made this difference in student performance. So this is one way to really satisfy that. As I mentioned, there are hundreds of placements at one site. It is a single classroom that can be a little bit confusing. The way we have been working it is just a 1 hour a week placement, and that's how we can fit all these teacher candidates. If you wanted it, for example, to be a more intensive placement, then you could have fewer candidates. But we will also talk about that later. Yes, we have a question.
Pardon me. We have one question from a participant who asked if each of the high school students is from the same high school. So maybe provide some information about where the students come from to the Campus Mentors program.
Yes, at our site, they are all from the local high school, and then that really assists with the school's transportation problems. So it's not multiple sites, but again, that was really something that was a decision of the partner, because our partner was our local school district. They really wanted to populate it, but that's not to say you couldn't do something different. So there are low costs. Obviously, there's a cost to having a dedicated classroom on campus, and we'll talk about that later. But we really like it. We're not sending a lot of people to schools. The outlay really is in student youth transportation, so getting the high school students over to us at the university, and I'll talk about that later. But if you look at the number of teacher candidates we serve, the cost is really, really low. The maintenance is really low. It's really run by the district. Once you get the ball rolling, I tend to stop out once a week, just make sure things are running smoothly. But it doesn't require the same level of maintenance as a lot of really intensive partnerships. Question?
Question came in of how will this model work for student teachers in higher ed? So for teacher candidates who are, I'm assuming this means teacher candidates who are doing their student teaching.
Right. So correct us if we're wrong about student teaching. We have not used it for a student teaching site per se, and I'll get to that a little bit later in terms of the flexibility. Not that it couldn't be used, but in our case, we're actually running it as a career and technical ed, and we don't have that certification. So we do not do that. It could be done, but again, that sort of goes to how are you going to use it as something where it's sort of a one-shot, once a week, 1 hour, or more intensive. So another really nice thing about this model is that it is teaching, research, and service. So I just find that the creativity, the outlet for creativity is really endless in terms of what are your faculty looking for, what are your pre-service teachers looking for. There's an opportunity for everybody to take the initiative and think of some really exciting things, like, for example, we've had student nurses come in and talk about heavy lifting, nice, talk about healthy living. We've had kinesiology and health activities. We've had math day. Anything that students or faculty are interested in can think of. Our population of youth really has so many needs, as you imagine. Question?
Question is, how many students do you place total, and how many of those are placed through Campus Mentors? So in other words, how many students do we have within our college to place, and then how many of those go to Campus Mentors?
This is a wonderful question. We have a lot of teacher candidates, and I'm afraid to say what number because I don't have that off the top of my head. But I do know that about a quarter of all of our candidates go through Campus Mentors. But again, that's our choice because we chose to make it sort of an entry level. You could easily do it, and we'll talk about this later, where, for example, you have all of your high school candidates go through the program in some fashion. I tried really hard to put the hours, you'll see later, in a calendar in terms of what is the input. So it does pay for itself. in terms of all of these things that you see, especially, as I said, for a really tight, involved partnership. All of you know the amount of work, the amount of effort it takes to initiate and keep up with a really strong partnership. And it's a lot of people, and it's a lot of administration, and it's a lot of, you keep coming back to the drawing boards. And we certainly did that initially. But now that we're running smoothly, it just seems like every year it just gets simpler. So recently we were named an innovation by AACTE, and we're part of the Innovations Inventory. And that means that we've met their highest level of research outcomes. And I will show our research outcomes, I think now, because we're really proud of it. And we've been invited to speak at CAEP conferences and to the State Alliance as an example of a type partnership that makes a direct impact on youth. So I'm going to go to our data really quickly and then head back. We're really proud of our data, and this is a very simplistic version. We also look at behavior reports. We look at attendance and how that's going. But the biggest impact really seems to be on credits earned, GPA. The idea is to get them moving toward graduation, and you can see that we're very successful with that. We choose to have 9th and 10th graders in our program, and I was actually just an hour ago, I was out of our program. It started yesterday, and our teacher was having the students say what their greatest success and greatest failure was from the previous year. And one of our freshmen said, "I didn't get suspended last year." And that was his greatest success, and I thought, that's it. You know, we have found the correct population. So if you want to see more of our data, I have this sheet posted for you. We also have published research. I think this is published in Teacher Education Quarterly, but not positive. And I have those links on my website. So those are the reasons that we have found that Campus Mentors really works for us. And just clicking through again, a lot of you had mentioned wanting to know more about sort of what can you do with this model. So as you can see, you can serve different grade levels, and that's really something to present to your partnering district about what you can do with this. Some of you had already mentioned looking at the different types of field placements this could be. And as I said, there's not really a reason that we picked the initial entry level as our placement. It was just something that we needed at Miami University, but there's no reason why it couldn't serve in some of these other roles. As I said, I really see it as counting well toward being a great field experience for our high school educators, and I'm sure some of you find this, that our prospective high school educators don't always know about this type of population. So they don't realize the diversity of young people in high schools. When they come out here, they really get a look at what makes these young people tick, rather than just seeing like, oh, they're unmotivated, oh, they're rude. They say, wow, I really understand the complexity of these young people's lives, because they're able to get in there in an environment that is more conducive for them. They feel more comfortable there, and they really get to know the young people, and they say, you know, now I just have a better idea of who these people are. So because we have such a close relationship with the teacher, as I mentioned, we've had really great success in just some really unique activities. We actually, early on, one of our mentors was in a fraternity, and he decided that his fraternity brothers were going to get together a learning day and brought the people out to the fraternity house, which was great because it really dispelled a lot of the myths the young people had, and created activities with them, and they moved around the house and met a lot of the young men who were really served as role models. And so that was just one of those sort of serendipitous activities that somebody found for us, and it was just totally student-led, which was really exciting. So you can do a lot of instruction with this. We have a very strong school psychology program here on campus, and so they've run a couple social skills groups for us that have been just amazing. This year, a faculty member asked me, could we take an intern for social work? That worked great too, because all of our students need that. So there's just a lot that you can do with it, and the sky's the limit really in terms of your creativity and the creativity of your colleagues. So I'd like to get into what it takes to actually implement this model. But I want to continue to encourage you, if you have more questions, just keep asking them, even about the model. And here you can actually see, well, you can see me, and you can see our teacher, and you can see our dean, Michael Dantley. So these preconditions are absolutely essential to establish before you are ready to sort of do anything. This is really the initial planning step. And we identified these three preconditions, and it's something that if you have that right at the beginning, you'll have a really solid foundation to get this going. So first, you need a project manager, and clearly I'm serving in that role here, and that's somebody to coordinate. Could you have a project manager who is a high school employee? Absolutely, you could. So I think there's strengths and weaknesses to having project manager from both sides, but especially at the beginning, there's a lot of pieces to put together. Most of you have probably had a lot of experience with other partnerships. And another biggie, final biggie, is that the higher education must agree to provide classroom and parking. And I don't have to tell you about parking, right? An entire partnership can go down over whether the teacher is allowed to park on campus or not. But these are some things where if you've got them ahead of time, right, because anyone who's tried to get space on campus knows how hard that is, how that has to happen. But a lot of times, once leadership is really on board with this, it starts moving. These are just some things to think about absolutely immediately. Do we have a project manager? Do we have the teacher, the transportation? So when I say transportation, I mean the district is willing to take young people from the schools and bring them to campus. And I should say, by the way, that we actually have a half-day program. We have 10th graders in the morning, 9th graders in the afternoon. Again, that is just something that was something that the school asked for. Do you have a question?
Yeah, we have one question that who asked, how many K-12 classes do you have on campus?
How many classes?
Yeah, in other words, how many of these K-12 classes exist on campus?
We just have a single room. I hope that answers your question. We have 12 to 16 students, basically enough for them to break even in terms of the funding for the teacher. So we only have 12 to 16 young people on campus at one time. But you all have worked with young people. It's funny to say only, right? Because that can be quite a lot to handle. So I really wanted to put the obstacles up front because those are really important to know about, and really these are things that I think, oh, if we had known this ahead of time, really would have helped out a lot. So youth transportation, one nice thing is we were able to look at where are some of the high schoolers from the local school already going. So some of them were already coming to our campus for work experiences. So we managed to work in with the buses. You all know it's all about the busing on campus. So if they're not willing to provide the transportation, and a lot of schools transport youth to various places that you might not even know about. We used to have an alternative school here in town, and they went 45 minutes. So it's not something that cannot be overcome. In other words, it can be overcome, but it's important to know about. Question?
We actually have two questions. I think you may have answered one of them, which is how many days a week do the K-12 students come to campus? And also, how are the students from the high school chosen?
So it is an everyday, 5 days a week program, half-time. Again, that is completely something that our school partner asked for. And the other question I'm actually going to answer later. So the other obstacle, space on campus. Those of you who are university people, you know that has to get done really early. But it's possible. We've all seen special projects sort of pop up at the last minute. Honestly, when I was given our space, I kind of didn't like it. But first of all, beggars can't be choosers. And secondly, it actually turned out really, really well. It's kind of tucked a little ways back at the university, and our uptown area is a little bit harder to walk to, if you know what I mean. So that was very helpful. Determining stakeholders seems like it would be pretty easy, but sometimes there are people in positions you don't know about. Like I accidentally offended our service learning people by not including them, and then you don't know who has a stake. At the school, like our curriculum coordinator at our school really wanted to be involved. So more communication is better. You do want to have a small working group, but it really is based on trust and just an initial relationship with the school, just two people who trust each other and want to work together for something new. It can just start with one person at the university, one person, really. But figuring out who needs to know is really, really important. And then the last one is our university and our school schedules obviously don't align really well. They don't align perfectly. So we have to figure out, like, for example, we have a January term. Who's going to do tutoring during that time, or what is the teacher going to do differently during that time? But reconciling schedules is not a huge obstacle, really, but it's something to think about. Like, for example, I told you I went out today. Well, our university doesn't start for 2 weeks, and then we can't place our teacher candidates for another week or two. So we have figured this out over the years, but it's good to think, oh, you know, our university starts 3 weeks after the school. What are we going to do about it? So it's just something to think about. So I want to share my implementation timeline, and I feel like I guess it was all getting on the screen. So what I tried to do to assist you is to help you think about what needs to get done each month. And I am really an organizer and a planner, but it's, as you know, it's so challenging to start a new project that I try to go back right afterwards and say, how much time did it take, and what do I wish I had known earlier? So that's really what this is about, and a guesstimate as far as what you're going to need to do. I mean, how much time it's going to take. Like the preconditions, one of them might just be, we got it. And then another might take a lot of discussion to figure out what are we going to do. So I gave my best guess about those. And you can see that it really does take a year. Do you have to have a full year? No, but I like to have extra time that's put in here because you are going to have setbacks. There's just no way dealing with people, those of you who've done partnerships, again, there's just no way not to have setbacks. So the first thing is really those preconditions. And when you have those, you really have a great foundation to start. So I did want to speak a little bit about the target student population, and some of you clearly had questions about that. And I have a little bit of guidance later, but I did want to say for the student population, we really looked at the students who are falling through the cracks. I'm a special educator, and so the whole time I kind of had in my mind those students with mild disabilities. But after talking with the school, they really wanted to target a population where they weren't getting any extra support, where they really didn't have any structure. They were failing. They weren't engaged in school. I mean, you all know who I'm talking about. It's this sort of big nebulous population. So they had they've pretty much all been referred for testing at some point and are on our student assistance team radar, but they just weren't making it, and I'll speak more about that later. So the school's obviously going to have a lot to say in kind of who they want. Question?
Question is, how do you handle any disciplinary issues with students?
Another great question about disciplinary issues, and I'm going to get to that a little later when we talk about the population. Yes.
Another question: how many public schools involved students learn? What did the students learn for a half a day? Half of the day, what did they do? The other half.
So we have a single teacher, and he teaches online classes, and I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to any of you who are working with alternative school populations. That's how it's run. And so the school picks, they usually say, okay, a lot of our freshmen failed biology, right? So we want to do biology out at the university with the teacher. So each year they revisit which classes they're going to take with us. And again, that's online programming, so other kids who are in alternative programs take the very same classes, and then they decide when they come back to school, which again is completely up to them, the half day. What are they going to take during their half day, and what teachers are they going to be with? And then with the communication, and we've had some of our pre-service teachers do some of the communication back with the high school, to say, so our teacher on campus can say, you know what, I know that you all have a world history test coming up, so let's study for that, or let's get out your notes, or let's make sure that this, math is completed. So he also really serves as our teacher. He also serves as a liaison, and he knows what's going on at the school too, and that is just invaluable. So going back to some of our contacts and what needs to be done, the university attorney wasn't really an obstacle. It's just that they like to know, we found this the hard way, they kind of like to know whether there's going to be young people on campus, which I totally get. So they were on board, but if we had notified them earlier, it would have gone much more smoothly. We did not really ask for, I think we did have some funds initially so our teacher could get additional textbooks, but it's still worth thinking, if you want funding, if you, some of you may be in institutions where they give course releases, but anything like that to assist, or if you wanted to write some small grants, this is really great candidate for local grants because it is something new that directly impacts youth. Another thing, just moving down a little bit, is where is the greatest need at your university? I do not recommend asking for volunteers. I recommend putting it in the syllabus as a requirement so that we know students are out there. So it doesn't even have to be an education class. Those of you who are at smaller institutions, it may work better for your social work students. Honestly, we also have family studies program. We actually teach health, so health education, people are in community health. It really works with a lot of great variety of majors, but it's great to have that class. Now, we actually have a separate 1-hour mentoring class. I do not at all think that that is needed. I think it could easily be a requirement within a class. And if you have extra, you're not ever going to get a one-to-one match with that, no matter how hard you try. So the best thing is to have more mentors, and then some of the youth can have more than one mentor. I am more than happy to share what I do in my mentoring class. It's actually based on the Check and Connect model identified by University of Minnesota. Super simple, great data, so happy to share that if you'd like. The tutoring we do through our Intro to EdSci class, but that's just because we needed a service learning placement for that class. We have also over the years used Introduction to Education. We have had some placements for our high school, future high school teachers, but that's really important because the university needs to get their needs met. It really is, the whole thing is really based on the win-win model, and so that's really important. The daily schedule, what I mean by I think the rest are pretty self-explanatory on this page. The guidance timelines for scheduling, that just means, so like February, March, your high school guidance counselors will be looking to schedule young people so for the next year. So they need to know where they're placed. And I know that some of you have questions about how to, what kind of students to get for this, and so that is coming up. Please ask if you have questions on any of these lines particularly. I think most of them are pretty self-explanatory. What I mean by technology integration is, as I mentioned, our classes are online for our young people, so we wanted to make sure that the technology provided by the school was going to work with, for example, like our university internet. You know, how is that going to work? So the technology people really need to speak to each other, just like we educators need to speak with our colleagues at the school or conversely at the university. So the reason why I said apply to human subjects is because you're going to be collecting data at least on the young people, K-12 students. I have done some small studies on our tutors and mentors. I feel like there's a lot more that could be done there, especially based on what you choose, like what kind of experience is this going to be for them. It makes great research in teacher education because we just don't have that much in terms of what is an impactful experience in terms of the research literature. So you could do a lot there, and I'm just putting that in there because we do have data that we need to think about what we're going to do. And I think the rest is pretty self-explanatory. Please continue to ask if you have questions about this in terms of what needs to get in each month. Again, it's really going to be adapted to what the needs of your partnership, because every partnership, as you know, is very different. So some of these are going to be a snap, and some of them are going to take longer, and some of them might run into the next month. We did our first year, we did have some scrambling around in July and August, and I did take a lot of trips to the bus shelter, but our bus transportation people were really, really positive and excited for us, and they were on board. And so that was really neat, but just making sure, okay, we're actually going to figure out what we need to do to get our young people to campus. Question?
How many college students are involved in the mentor program in a given semester? Similar to earlier question about how many, but maybe an idea of how many students typically are part of the program.
So as I mentioned, I try to do one-to-one with the mentors. The tutors really just kind of fit where the need is. So our teacher might just say, okay, we really need to focus on math. You tutor are good at math, so you go here, and he just assigns people. But the mentors are are matched carefully, one-to-one. And so I try to make the class, I think I do 35. So we have about 30 young people, 15 and 15. So I cap the class at 35 because, people will drop the class and things will happen. As I said, I have tried to do one-to-one and it's impossible. And of course, these are young people who have a lot of challenges. So we have had students drop out of school to, go to mental health services, juvenile detention, and of course, it's a very transient population. Yeah, another question.
There's another question about who provides transportation. Is it the university or the school?
For us, our school provides transportation. And as I mentioned, thankfully we were able to run it into other transportation. Like, I didn't realize the number of buses that are going out to other places, including our university. So we have a program for young adults with significant special needs, and it's on campus, and some of them are doing work experiences. I didn't know that. So sometimes the buses are already running certain places, and that just takes somebody who knows the transportation. So a lot of you were asking about student selection, and this is what we can give you in terms of our knowledge of what works. So first, we say accept help. Of course, a lot of these students are pretty reluctant learners. They're not going to say, oh, thank you, young person, for coming to help me, college student. They're going to be challenging to work with, but they do have to be able to accept help. And we do not require young people to come into this program. For our high school students, we tell them, we show them this slide, You have to be able to accept help, and everyone has good days and bad days, but they have to be able to have someone sitting with them and want to do that. Behavioral criteria, good question about that, particularly because we do have to realize we have a single teacher out there who's in charge of everything, and these students do have behavioral challenges. However, we cannot accept students with really significant behavioral needs. And the reason for that is because we only have the one adult there. We have had behavioral incidents. We're really lucky. We've only had 1 or 2 fights over our 7-year history. And so an assistant principal does need to be on call. So we have had assistant principals come out and get young people when they've had a behavioral incident. So that has happened, some smoking, some damaged property, and it's just going to happen with this population. But that's why there's the emergency preparedness plan and making sure that all the stakeholders are involved, because you do need to plan for that. So again, they have to be able to, some people laugh, but we have a 5-minute bus ride, and some young people cannot behave on a 5-minute bus ride, realizing they're all together. So we tell them, you must behave on the bus, and you have to be mature about that. And then the last aspect we found, not surprisingly, they have to come to school. So we found that this program actually did not end up improving attendance. A small amount, not a lot. So if they want to benefit from the program, they have to commit to coming to school. So please ask if you have more questions about that. But it was also something that the school really wanted to have control of, and that makes sense because they know their students, right? They know who needs extra help, but then providing this, I think, is really helpful because, as you know, sometimes they'll pick the students who have the most significant behavioral challenges, and a single teacher like that is just not equipped for that. So what do we need to work on an annual basis? Now, the cool thing is, most of the time, this is like a cup of coffee with me and the teacher, and that's it. And then we're done planning for the year. Or even just a few emails like, okay, we already know how to do this. But as you know, systems change and people change, a lot of turnover, right? So, for example, we've switched what courses are involved here at the university level. You can imagine what I thought the year that I thought our high school was going to 3 schedules, a Monday, Friday, a Tuesday, Thursday, and a Wednesday. So we had to work all of that out with transportation. I do like to keep active in terms of what research we're conducting on the model. And that's something, again, where you can really rely on your faculty initiative in terms of creativity. And then the mentoring and tutoring times, each year the teacher changes it a little bit. Like he likes to have a little bit of time at the beginning for setup, a little decompression time at the end before students get on the bus. And then he also decided he didn't want all of them coming in right at the hour and having this mass exodus. So he'll tell us, I want 4 to 5 tutors and I want these times. So we actually have overlapping tutoring times like 8 to 9, 8:30 to 9:30. And I really like this picture because our institution really emphasizes undergraduate research. So we've had a lot of students want to step up their involvement after they work with us. And you know, I should also mention, we have also had some students decide they did not want to become teachers after being out with us. But those of you teacher educators will know that that's not necessarily a bad thing. They say, well, I just didn't understand the kind of students that I'd be teaching. So that has happened to us as well. So that's just something to be aware of. So I see there's a question here. Yes.
The question is, let me get back to it. So the class on campus is centered around the need of the school you're working with. That's one question. You are only teaching one course per semester, or this person is asking if you're only teaching one course semester, or if it's perhaps multiple courses per semester. You have the tutors that consist of the students on campus. How are the tutors chosen from the university?
Okay, so that's kind of 3 questions, and I realized I already forgot the first one. So let's just start with the third one. Our tutors are just people who have signed up for our Intro to Ed Psych class. Most of them want to be teachers. Many of them don't want to be teachers, and that is their placement. You'd asked about the mentoring class. I do teach that 1 credit hour mentoring class. I am just a regular faculty member, so as I said, I have found that this upkeep is like 30 minutes a week or something like that. So I just have a regular course load as assigned. I do the 1 credit hour class. In addition to that, it's really not much work for me. Happy to share that. But there's no reason why that couldn't be part of a pre-existing class. Honestly, if I were to do it again, I'd probably say, why not put the mentors, get the mentors all from Intro to Social Work or something like that? Because I think it's easiest to assign and find a colleague who wants to get on board, and that person can be as creative as they want with it. Okay, so Jason, what questions have I not answered yet?
The first part was about selecting the course subject matter with the school that you're working with. And is it limited to just one course, or is it potentially more than one course in that half day?
Oh, okay, so I believe that we're asking about the high school students and what classes they're taking. So I'm going to answer that. It's a half day, so they get however many courses they would have in a half day at high school. I think one group has 3 and one has 2, depending on the number of classes that they're missing. And then the school, yes, the school in our case totally chooses it. I would say if you have a particular need for, say, pre-service teachers in math education, I would say to them, look, we would like to do a math intervention, and here's what we can offer. So we just basically said, what subjects do you want? Because we were looking for something that really introduces this population of young people to our pre-service teachers. So please tell us if that does not answer all the questions, and I will try to do better. So I wanted to go a little further, and then hopefully have a few minutes to take questions at the end. I wanted to tell you the support that we will provide you if you're interested in establishing one of these sites. I do have a website. I offer one-on-one consultation. I really don't want to, I'm not looking to make money, so all of this is free. You are welcome to come out to our site in Ohio. I've conducted multiple site visits. This photo here is from one several years back. Our first scheduled visit for this year, as you can see, is Thursday, September 14, and I still have room for 2 more institutions. I do recommend highly that if you do a site visit, if you're a higher ed person, that you bring a partner from the school so they can actually see it. We meet out at the high school. We meet obviously at our site, get a chance to eat lunch with the teacher and talk with him. And he does not mince words, so our school people will absolutely tell you like it is. Just to let you know, I'm happy to help really in any way in terms of speaking on the phone or doing virtual visits. And we also offer a data template because we would like to keep track of our data and our programs. So this is the last slide, but again, if you stick around at the end here, you can if you complete the post-webinar survey, which is really about the supports that we provide, so I know what your needs are, you can have the opportunity to win one of 3 $25 Amazon cards, and there's not that many people on this call. And the only thing that we ask as a team is that if you do replicate this model, we ask, number 1, that you use our campus mentor's name, and it is trademarked, but it's by me, so you can use it. I want you to use it with your site, and that you agree to provide data to us annually. That's what our template is, because we want to make a large database that shows how this works. Yes, questions?
2 questions. The first one is, are the students in the EdSite class assigned a certain number of hours that they have to tutor each week?
Yes. It's only a 1-hour-a-week commitment for them, and again, that was just something our university people decided because that's where the need was. Because people say, how in the world do you have 150 tutors, or 120 tutors in this one classroom? And it's because it's a sort of one-shot type of assignment where they have 1 hour a week. But as I mentioned, it could very easily be, let's say, a practicum for, let's say, junior level practicum where we're talking about behavior management or something, and then students would be able to have a little bit more in-depth experience, and what they would be able to do would be different. And again, it's a nice thing about having a teacher who wants to work with us is that we can say, hey, can we teach a lesson? Can we put together something for you? What can we do? And another question, yes.
Another participant asked, is this model strictly for K-12 and not higher ed? How can this model be tailored to higher education?
So this model, the central aspect of this model is that we're taking youth who are at risk and we are putting them on college campuses. So hopefully that answers your question. So there's young people, and instead of receiving their instruction on the high school campus, they're receiving their instruction here, but it's still high school classes. It's not early college. Well, if you have any further questions, please email me. My email address is there, and the only thing that's challenging about it is that my name is Wasburn-Moses and not Washburn. So if you start with the W-A-S-H, it should come back to you. So please feel free to email me. And don't forget your post-webinar survey so that I can have some follow-up data in terms of where I go next. And I hope to hear from some of you later on. Thanks for your time this afternoon.